Hello, good morning to everyone. Introduction first, and we also have three ideal reactors after understanding the ideal, what is the ideality, and then the derivation of the equations, and later we will also try to solve some problems. Okay. So now to start with, I would like to ask this question: what do we do as chemical engineers? We enhance the quality of this planet. How do you do this? What do you mean by enhancing the quality of the planet? Enhancing the quality of the planet means your daily life is much better once the chemical engineers start supplying the materials. Like for example, the early morning you have toothpaste, toothbrush, and also you have soaps, and the books what you are going to use, the dress what you have, textiles. Textiles is not 100% cotton, but most of the textile, the dress what you are using, it is also some part is plastic. So polymers and all that. So that's why all our quality of life is increased because of various chemicals produced by chemical engineers. For example, petrol, when you want to come by your two-wheeler, or you may want to come by your car, or even cycle, where the tubes are made by chemical engineers. So we increase the quality of the life on this planet through medicines, through cosmetics, through your textile dress, and we have now beautiful shoes like Reebok shoes or Nike shoes. All these are produced by chemical engineers. So I just want to tell you, these are the various chemicals that are possible for the chemical engineers to be produced. I think you can see this PPT. You start at the center, we have the petroleum, natural gas, you have adhesives and paints coming clockwise, then you have pulp, paper, and for printing various chemicals, we have plastic and rubber, textiles, pharmaceuticals and fine chemicals, dyes, pigments, agricultural products like fertilizers and all that. Then you have health products. There are many health products that are coming now, like vitamins, tonics and all that. Then for building, it is the chemical engineers who make cement and all that. So building, mining, smelting and all that. And because of these chemicals, so many chemicals are produced, we will also pollute the environment. So environmental protection also is part of chemical engineering. If you look at this slide, these are all the fields of chemical engineering. So that means the definition of chemical engineering is producing chemicals on a very large scale. That is the simplest definition which I can give you. Production of chemicals on very large scale. Very really true, because sometimes we have to produce 5,000 tons per day of a chemical, for example fertilizers, or maybe 10,000 tons per day I am talking 24 hours. So that is why we are producing chemicals on a very large scale. So our main business is to produce chemicals, and using these chemicals we are making various things like soaps, petrol, fertilizers, plastics, rubber, and many other things what we daily use. So that is the main objective of chemical engineers. Now if you see all those chemicals what we are talking, these chemicals can be splitted or divided into two categories. They are commodity chemicals and specialty chemicals. I think most of you would have completed this course called chemical technology. In chemical technology course, we teach you how do you produce various chemicals. So in chemical technology, we can divide those chemicals as commodity chemicals and the specialty chemicals. Commodity chemicals are relatively simple molecules, like for example sulfuric acid, made by chemical transformations on a massive scale, producing at the lowest possible cost. The cost of production, the cost of the chemical is cheap. We produce in large quantities. These are also called bulk chemicals, bulk in large scale, and that is why probably the cost is reduced. And we have specialty chemicals, like the volume is very small, but the cost is very high. This already you have seen. Those who are using some kind of cosmetics and deodorants and all that, you may have only 10 ml of deodorant or the sprays, but that may be costing 200, 300 rupees. It may be 10 ml or 20 ml or 30 ml. So this kind of low volume but very costly chemicals are called specialty chemicals. Like for example, drugs, injections. Sometimes an injection, life-saving injection, may be only 3 ml, 3 milliliters, very small quantity, but that may be costing 30,000, 50,000, even 1 lakh rupees. These are the specialty chemicals what we are producing. So as chemical engineers, you have to learn how to produce chemicals on a very large scale, and also you have to learn how to produce these chemicals in a very small scale. Now, the techniques will change when you are producing very large scale chemicals and when you are producing specialty or low volume chemicals. So how do you actually produce this? I think you have to be really proud to be chemical engineers, because almost 60 to 70% of the products used by a common man every day is produced by chemical engineers. I am sure all of your teachers would have told you in your earlier classes about how many chemicals which are useful in daily life, including your toothpaste, toothbrush and all that. So these are the things which are produced by chemical engineers. How do you actually produce these chemicals? These chemicals are produced in an equipment called a chemical reactor. And what is going on in this reactor is a chemical reaction. The simplest one which I can tell you is hydrogen H2 plus Cl2 chlorine giving us 2HCl. This is the simplest stoichiometric equation. And in terms of A and B, when you generalize this, A plus B giving you the product HCl here. A is hydrogen, B is chlorine, and that is giving us, of course with the balance and all that, hydrochloric acid. So we use these chemical reactions and then conduct them in an equipment called chemical reactor, and that is what I am going to tell you. How do you design these reactors? That is the thing what I would like to share in the next 6 hours. Good. So, but before that, what kind of reactors we have? How many kinds of reactors we have? I would like to show that, because reactors will be in various forms. Some reactors will be very lengthy pipes. Some reactors will be very short, fat tanks. Why? How do you choose these tank reactors, and how do you choose these pipe reactors which are sometimes 1 kilometer length? I am not exaggerating, 1 kilometer length, where they turn the reactor, the pipes like this, and the total length may be sometimes 1 kilometer length. So you have what are called the tubular reactors, you have what are called the tank reactors, and you can have fluidized bed reactors, packed bed reactors. Some of them you would have already heard when you are discussing the fluid mechanics. In fluid mechanics, your teacher should have told you how do you find out the pressure drop in a packed bed using Ergun's equation, for example. You also should have done experiments in packed beds and also fluidized beds. Fluidization is the technique where solids are kept in suspension. That is what you would have done in your laboratory when you are doing the experiment. There again, we will try to find out what are the velocities, what is the pressure drop across this equipment. All that you should have studied already in fluid mechanics. I am sure fluid mechanics course definitely you could have completed. If you have forgotten, please brush it up. And all these equipment like packed bed, fluidized bed, moving bed, and the tubular reactors, tank reactors, all will come under the reactor design. So now let me show you some of these few reactors quickly. For example, there is a hand there like this. That is one of the reactors. We call that as packed bed reactor. This is sulfuric acid plant. Of course, I am sorry, it is in the German language, but anyway it does not matter, because in how do you produce sulfuric acid? Sulfuric acid is produced taking sulfur first and then oxidizing that sulfur plus oxygen, giving us sulfur dioxide. Now this sulfur dioxide is converted to sulfur trioxide. Again the reaction is SO2 plus half O2 giving me SO3, but the difference now is sulfur is burnt in oxygen to give sulfur dioxide, and sulfur dioxide to sulfur trioxide, it is a catalytic reaction. Both are chemical reactions. The first one is sulfur plus O2 giving us SO2. The second reaction is SO2 plus half O2 giving us SO3. This is catalyst. And I am sure you may be knowing what is this catalyst. This catalyst is vanadium pentoxide. So now the design of SO2 to SO3 through of O2, that is the design is different compared to simply sulfur burning in a reactor. That is also a chemical reactor, this is also a chemical reactor. So for every chemical we have a process flow chart. This is what I am showing here, process flow chart, where you should have definitely studied in your chemical technology. I know most of you would have hated this course also, because I think you have to mug up and reproduce the results. This course is the starting point for all our chemical engineering, because that flow chart only gives us what are the steps finally to produce a particular chemical. And I can also tell you here very quickly, I can also tell you here very quickly how do you actually start the chemical process. The chemical process always starts with the product. Here for example, the product is sulfuric acid. So now someone says that sulfuric acid has to be produced, let us say 100 tons per day, right? So that is the starting point. So now once you have sulfur dioxide production to be done 100 tons per day, then you have to now find out how much sulfur is required, how much oxygen is required. Again to convert sulfur dioxide to sulfur trioxide, how much oxygen is required. All these calculations we will do earlier. So now it starts with the product, then you try to find out what is the chemical reaction, like I have written on the board, that is the chemical reaction. Now thermodynamics will tell us already that whether this reaction is feasible or not, and once the reaction is feasible, then we have to see what are called the kinetics of the reaction. That means what is the speed of the chemical reaction. This part definitely your teachers have to tell, because I do not have time to teach the entire thing, but my portion is only how do you design the reactors alone. But before that we need this information of kinetics. We need the information from thermodynamics whether the reaction is feasible or not. Once we know the kinetics, like in kinetics, what you mean by kinetics is we will know what is the rate equation. Please remember, in kinetics we know only the rate equation. For example, rate equation can be as simple as K into Ca, where K is the reaction rate constant and Ca is the concentration of A. If I have a rate A going to R, that is the simplest chemical reaction I am now trying to take. So this is the rate, and I will also show you later what are the units of this rate and all that. So when I am starting this my lectures, I assume that your teachers would have already covered in their portion what is the order of reaction, what kind of rate equations one can get, all this information you require. If you have not done that already, I request all the teachers listening to this lecture, so kindly do that and give that connection. I am not able to give that connection, but I will show you where this rate comes. My portion is only taking that rate into account and then designing the reactor. Okay. So now let us come to this sulfuric acid plant, and now any process starts with the product, and now the product is now through chemical reactions, stoichiometric reactions we have to choose. The stoichiometric reaction, whether the reaction is feasible or not, one has to find out from thermodynamics. Then we have to also find out from kinetics what is the speed of the reaction. If the speed is very, very high, probably you need very small reactor. If the speed is very, very slow, like biochemical reactions are very, very slow. Biochemical reaction engineering also a chemical engineering part. Biochemical engineering is also part of chemical engineering. So this biochemical reactions are so slow, that is why the reactors are very, very big. Like for example, you should have seen the wastewater treatment plants in the industry. They are very big swimming pools. That is a reactor, very, very big size. The reason for that is the reactions are very, very slow. That is why you need very large reactor. So that is why your kinetics will tell us that whether the reaction is very fast or very slow, and what are the corresponding values, and there is no order of reaction and all that. What you have is a rate equation. If you have first order rate, you are very, very lucky, and most of the time you may not be lucky in chemical engineering, because the reactions are very, very complicated, and you will not have simple first order reaction, except in academic institutions where we always talk about first order reaction to design the reactor, because that is the simplest one with mathematics. So that is the reason, but the procedure is exactly same. Mathematically it will be complicated when you go to more and more complicated rate equation. Okay. So now coming back to this chemical process, now kinetics will tell me the reaction is feasible. Now I have to find out what kind of reactor I have to choose. That is what I would like to tell in this 6 lectures. What kind of, how do you choose the reactor? And once you choose the reactor, we know that from thermodynamics 100% conversion is not feasible, right? Why? The reason is, when there is 100% conversion, this rate will be 0. This rate will be 0 at 100% conversion, and when the rate is 0, you will see this later, that in the reactor design expression, this rate minus RA comes in the denominator. So once I have this rate in the denominator, which is 0, I will have infinite volume. So that is why we normally go to don't go to 100% conversions. There is an economically feasible conversion that is possible, maybe 90% conversion, not universal. Sometimes it is 95, sometimes it is 98. You have to find out which conversion is economically feasible. What do you mean by economically feasible? When I am going to higher and higher conversion, 0.99, 0.999, 0.9999, 4 times, 5 times 9. So that means the volume of the reactor is becoming very, very large, and finally it becomes infinity, right? So when you have infinite volume, it occupies the entire universe. So you don't have a place to operate, you have to be inside the reactor. So that is the reason why there is always a conversion which is economically possible conversion, that you have to find out. Okay. So because 100% conversion is not possible, always that unconverted reactants have to be separated from the reaction mixture. That is why you have distillation columns, absorption columns, extraction columns. So all mass transfer equipment comes after the reactor, where you want to separate the reactants, unconverted reactants, with the products, because product should be 100% pure many times, right? So or otherwise, if it is not 100% pure, maybe the product is accepted with 0.999 purity. And how do you bring that purity? That purity will come only in either a distillation column or an absorption column or an extraction column. I am sorry, I am not able to tell when distillation columns can be chosen, or when absorption columns can be chosen, or when extraction columns can be chosen, or leaching and all that. So that I think you can ask your teachers, or otherwise you can send me the mail, I will try to answer. Distillation column is normally used when the product is liquid, and you have difference in boiling points, difference in boiling points of the product, difference in boiling point of the reactant. If the boiling point of the reactant is only, let us say, 50 degrees centigrade and the product is 80 degrees or 90 degrees centigrade, then we use distillation, because 50 degrees centigrade is the reactant that will evaporate first, go to the top of the distillation column, and then you can take it. And now the length of the distillation column depends on what is the kind of purity you require. So that is the meaning of this entire flow chart. That is how you build the flow chart. You have to first say what is the chemical you have to produce. Once you know that, for example, sulfuric acid, then you have to find out chemical reactions, stoichiometric equations, check whether they are really feasible for the reaction to take place, and once you have the feasibility studies, then study the kinetics for getting the rate equation, and once you have the rate equation, now choose the reactor. And I will tell you what kind of reactors we have, and luckily in chemical engineering it is one of the greatest simplifications of in chemical engineering. All the reactors can be only designed using 3 assumptions that I will discuss later. So just I want to show you some of these reactors. Okay, good. So that is how you go. And once the conversion is not 100% in the chemical reactor, then you need the distillation, the separation equipment, mass transfer equipment to separate the products from the reactants. That is why you will have distillation and all that. Mass transfer also you should have studied, right? So this is the overall picture of developing a flow chart. This is the sulfuric acid flow chart. Now I will show you nitric acid flow chart. What you have to see here is again this hand which is showing like this, that is the reactor. Don't worry about what kind of reactor, but you say the shape. You see the shape, and yeah, here also you see the shape where that hands are there. So this shape is different, this shape is different. And now I will show you another one, ammonia synthesis. This is another kind of reactor, packed bed, similar to sulfuric acid plant. You know, you should have studied again how do you produce ammonia. In fact, there is a story about ammonia that the chemical engineers really could save many people, because ammonia is produced to make fertilizers. I think in the beginning of 1900s or so, when population started growing, the natural production of all these vegetables and all eatables are not sufficient. So they have to put more and more fertilizers so that they can grow more and more. And the starting point for ammonia is, the starting point for fertilizers is ammonia. And ammonia is Haber-Bosch process. Haber-Bosch process, and Haber was a chemist and Bosch was a mechanical engineer turned into chemical engineer. So both of them have really designed that plant and saved the humanity, because at that time they produced ammonia, which is again used for fertilizers and all that. Okay, this is polymerization reactor. You see, this shape is again different. I will show you another one, ammonia synthesis. Okay, same thing, some other details. Yeah, you see, this is a fluidized bed reactor. This is another kind of reactor. What I am trying to say is reactors will come in different shapes and different sizes. That you should really believe, that there are so many types of reactors that are available in industry. And you see, you have another reactor here to produce olefins, not to produce olefins, hydroformylation of olefins, right? So this is another kind of reactor. Now these are the typical photographs of reactor. The first one is the batch reactor, and the other one is, we say CSTR, that is called continuously stirred tank reactor. These are used very widely in the industry, particularly for liquid phase reactions. Liquid, only if you have liquid reaction that is taking place, liquid. Okay. Now you see here, this is the plant where this arrow shows, that is the tank reactor, tank reactors, and here you have, I have written there plug flow reactor, that is tubular reactor, tubes connected. You can see the tube is bending like this, right? So this is what I was telling you. Sometimes the total length of all these tubes together will be 1 kilometer or 1.5 kilometers. How do you design this? First of all, when do you choose this? So all that information will come in reactor design. So now you see, this is the rotary kiln, what we call, where you produce cement. Cement is a solid reaction. Okay, calcium carbonate and many other chemicals they take, and a solid reaction is taking place. They put in this one side all the solid. By the time it comes to the other side, you will have the cement. So this is also a kind of chemical reactor. Now for example, even blast, this is the original ammonia reactor, the first time when they produced. This is the reactor what they have used. Fortunately in Germany I have seen this reactor with my own eyes when it was brought to university where it was developed, and now it is a showpiece because it has worked sufficiently and got corroded and all that. And each nut and bolt, these are the nuts and bolts. Each nut and bolt may weigh 5 kgs, sometimes 10 kgs. So the reason is that the pressure inside this reactor is so high. So to prevent it from breaking, from exploding, they need that kind of structures. This is ammonia reactor. So like that, this information I am taking from Levenspiel. Yeah, and normally I follow the Levenspiel book, which is one of the excellent books. I think most of your teachers also will know about this book, right? So follow this book and understand this book. There are many other books, but this is very popular book. The reason is the subject is explained in a beautiful, very simple manner. So I follow this book, and that's why I have taken all these pictures what I am showing you from this book. So if you have any doubts, you can go to that book and then try to find out. If you are not able to understand, you can ask your teachers. Still, if you are not able to get satisfactory answers, you can try me. I may give or may not give, because I think all of us 100% everything we don't know. So that's why I think, but we will attempt to definitely address if it is a very good question, right? Very good. So any question you can ask. It's not that only very good questions you have to ask. Good. So now these are the various kinds of reactors what I am showing here. Those are all catalytic reactors, because there you can see some kind of solid particles, and most of the time when we are talking about catalytic reactions, they are solid particles. So that is the reason why all those things are solid. And for example, the first one is packed bed. If you start from I don't know which A, and B also is a packed bed reactor. C also is a packed bed reactor. Now you see, in packed bed reactor itself, you have so many varieties. The question now comes in reactor design is why? When do you choose the first A type of the picture in A? When do you choose this kind of reactor where all the particles are put together, or when do you choose the other type of reactor where there are tubes where you cool, because the exothermic heat has to be removed. So that's why you put those tubes and send a coolant. Heat transfer also you should have studied. Send that coolant and remove the heat, right? So that is why you have now the tubes inside, but when do you use it? Yeah, then you have other thing as, first you have a packed bed, and above that you have another packed bed, and above that you have another packed bed. Like that it may be sometimes 3 packed beds or 4 packed beds. When do you choose or when do you design this kind of packed bed reactors? So that is why actually chemical reaction engineering is 2 courses. What we are trying to do is the simplest one, which is called homogeneous reactor design, and in catalytic reactors and all that is heterogeneous reactor design. That also I will show you later. So then there are many industrially catalytic reactions, industrial catalytic reactions, and for that you need a variety of chemical reactors. And the below 2 are the fluidized beds, where the particles are moving all the time when the gas is going up, whereas in packed bed they won't move. That's why we are calling packed. Sometimes it is also called fixed bed. The bed is not moving, it is fixed. Whereas fluidized bed, the particles move. And there is again what is called a moving bed, where this entire packing slowly moves down. You can do that experiment. You can take a test tube, pour sand in that, and put your finger at the bottom and then slowly give some gap. So the entire sand bed inside this test tube, where test tube means it is glass, where you can see the entire bed slowly slides down depending on the gap which you have given with your thumb. Right. So that is how moving beds are also used. For example, you could have heard what is called gasification of coal. Coal can be combusted to generate energy. Coal also can be gasified to generate energy again, which produces hydrogen, carbon monoxide and all that. So it can be used for power generation and all that. And people use moving beds for gasification. So there are, what I want to do this 1.5 hours lecture is that we would like to first justify that there are so many reactors in industry and all of them have to be first understood, and then we have to develop equations to design them. You will be very happy to know that the design is very simple, particularly homogeneous and some part of heterogeneous, and that is very simple, but the complications also we should know before actually we are trying to design. Let me see. Yeah, this is again the packed bed, what I have already told you, where all the particles are fixed, are packed. Then now, yeah, the same thing again I am just showing in a larger picture. Yeah, this is the fluidized bed where the particles are continuously bubbling. So then you also have, this is another packed bed where the solids are transferred from this reactor to this generator. This is also reactor. Reactor to reactor, the particles are just moved, and in a packed bed that is not possible. So now, yeah, this is another kind of packed bed. I was talking to you about moving beds. This one is the moving bed, where you have the entire bed with arrows down is slowly coming down. That is what is the moving bed. Good. And all these things are catalytic reactors. But yeah, this is what is the problem now, because I hope you know what is catalytic reaction, and there are also what are called non-catalytic reactions. Right. For example, carbon burning, carbon plus oxygen giving us carbon dioxide is a non-catalytic reaction. And I hope you know the definition of catalytic catalyst. Catalyst is a substance where it will only participate in the reaction, but it will not react. It will not change its composition, and then it will not disappear. It will be there all the time if there is no deactivation. That is the definition of catalyst, and most of the time we have only solid catalysis. Right. So this is only catalytic reactors, and non-catalytic reactors also one can design the same way as catalytic reactor with slight modification. That comes when you get the overall picture of the two courses, chemical reaction engineering 1 and chemical reaction engineering 2. These two courses you have to take, then only you will get a overall picture. What I am giving you is a small portion of a reactor design which is used both for catalytic reactions, non-catalytic reactions, and also homogeneous reactions. Good. So these are gas, liquid, solid reactions. So that means gas also is one of the reactants, liquid is one of the reactants, and solid can be catalyst. There are 3 phases now. Right. So these are the various designs that are useful for the reactions. Probably you may be thinking that I am showing you too many things, but it is only to appreciate that there are so many varieties of reactors. That is why I am showing you that. You do not have to remember all that, but it is better to know that there are various kinds of reactors that are available in chemical industry. So now I can show you some more. These are gas liquid reactions. Only gas and liquid, there is no solid. So now you can see how many ways a gas and liquid can be contacted. For example, liquid can be sprayed. I am sure you should have studied in mass transfer course where, for example, absorption. In absorption, we disperse the gas in the liquid. So now gas is the dispersed phase, because gas is moving in the form of bubbles, whereas liquid is continuously flowing. Right. So gas that you would have seen in many aquariums, when you are going to some shopping malls or in your own house also, you may put some fish and then you bubble oxygen, because fish also needs oxygen. So there what you see is bubbles coming. In chemical reaction engineering, those bubbles are one of the reactant. and liquid is another reactant. Now you see the gas in the bubble has to react with the liquid, and how the reaction is taking place, what are the steps required for this gas to go to liquid and then react with the liquid is the study of chemical reaction engineering. Same thing, for example, carbon combustion. Because these are the simple examples I am giving you so that you can visualize easily. No point in giving very complicated examples where you don't understand, I don't understand. Right? I will give you, you take a coal particle, coal all of you would have seen, carbon particle. Now you want to burn it. If you are leaving that coal particle in the absence of oxygen totally, there is no reaction. You need oxygen, because the reaction is C plus O2 giving you CO2, one of the simplest reactions. So C is a solid, carbon is a solid, oxygen is the gas. So if I put in this room carbon, in the next room oxygen, absolutely there is no contact, there is no reaction, right. So that is why we have to contact the solid particle and then put the gas going over that. I am talking about one single particle. When oxygen goes to the surface of the particle, I think maybe better I draw that. This is the carbon particle, and now oxygen is flowing like this, oxygen, this is carbon. Reaction is C solid plus O2 gas, better write these things, giving us CO2 gas. I am taking the simplest reaction that is possible. So now fluid mechanics will tell us, you already completed fluid mechanics. So fluid mechanics will tell us that whenever you have two phases, there is what is called a interface or boundary layer. This dotted line is the boundary layer created by the gas around the solid particle. So now oxygen has to diffuse through this boundary layer, and boundary layer is supposed to be the stagnant. It is dynamically stagnant, difficult to understand. So on the overall, it is a film where the oxygen molecules are diffusing through this, reaching the surface and then reacting with carbon. And we also know that through this CO2 has to come out, because that is the gas. Again, when I look at that film, only this portion I have just shown here. So you have oxygen diffusion, this is the surface, carbon, it goes like this is oxygen inside and oxygen on the surface, and CO2 will come out. Maybe CO2 has to come out. Yeah, CO2, there it will be more, this is CO2 coming out because of some resistance. So now there are two gases coming, one gas going inside, another gas coming outside, and then that is why we call equimolar counter diffusion in mass transfer. You should have definitely studied this, that equimolar counter diffusion. That is to calculate how much oxygen has gone to the surface. You should know, otherwise you don't know how much reaction has taken place. This is called heterogeneous non-catalytic reaction, right. So that again will give you a rate equation, and similarly this is the solid particle. I can easily extend this, the same thing as the gas. This is gas and I have the liquid flowing around this, or this gas bubble just rising in the liquid. What will now happen? You have a liquid film around this. Same thing now, the oxygen has to diffuse from this liquid film and reach the liquid surrounding this, because it is simply rising in the reactor. And when it is rising in the reactor, it diffuses and reacts with liquid, and the product may be in the liquid form and it stays in the liquid. If it is a gaseous product, that also forms some more bubbles, they will rise, because gas density is much less when compared to the liquid density at normal conditions. So that is why it goes up, right. So all these are the reactors. Now you can now say that yes, bubbles are moving in the liquid. Some of you may be intelligent, and then you may say that, of course all of you are intelligent, I am sorry, I cannot say that, because all intelligent people what may think is Why only bubbles I have to use as dispersed phase? Why should I also use liquid as the dispersed phase? How do you make now liquid as dispersed phase? This is what every day you are making when you are taking shower bath. When you are taking shower bath, in your bathroom, you have entire gas, oxygen is there, otherwise you can't live, right? So then you open the shower. Now from the shower, you have the droplets, small droplets of gas, droplets of liquid falling. Now same thing again, gas has to diffuse to the surface of the liquid droplet and it has to diffuse into the liquid droplet and then it has to react and you get the products. So in fact, every day what you are doing is connected with chemical engineering reactor design. So that is why what you have to remember is that because we have gas, liquid and solid, 3 phases, combination of all these phases will give us lots of information and lots of varieties of reactor design. Reactors, I don't say design is very simple, but reactors, right? So that is what I was trying to show you here, and then some more. Okay, this is the blast furnace and this is coal combustor. We call this one as moving grate combustor. Then you have here rotary kiln, all that, and this is the fluidized bed. Yeah, how many varieties of reactors are there? That is what only at this point of time you have to appreciate. What you have to appreciate is, yes, chemical reactors are so many varieties, right? And now we have to see the information, what is that is required for designing all these kinds of reactors, right? I hope I have justified why we have to study chemical reactor design or chemical reaction engineering. By the way, the title of chemical reaction engineering itself is one of the wonderful titles, because you are engineering a chemical reaction. That is the difference between chemist and chemical engineer. A chemist will not engineer a chemical reaction. He will simply conduct a chemical reaction in a very small test tube, right? So he will take maybe 5 grams, sometimes 1 gram reactant, puts into this test tube, go to the Bunsen burner, put this test tube on the Bunsen burner. Why? Because unless you increase the temperature, the reaction is not taking place. So that is why you go to Bunsen burner and then you just shake it. That shaking is to make the reaction mixture homogeneous, right? That's all, and the reaction takes place. He gets a product, he goes to some analytical equipment like liquid chromatograph, gas chromatograph, or you will use simply your titration method and then finally say that yes, I got the product. That's all. What is the total amount of product? Not more than 2 grams or 3 grams. But you are producing in chemical engineering 5,000 tons. That means 5,000 into 1000 kgs of a particular chemical in one day. So you cannot take test tubes and then go to Bunsen burner and then shake to produce so much amount of material. That is the reason why engineering problems will come. For example, how do I heat? Chemist simply heated by taking the test tube to the Bunsen burner. But you cannot take that big reactor where it may be 3 meters, 4 meters, like a big well. And if it is a tank reactor, the depth may be another 3 meters, 4 meters depth. That tank you cannot take to the Bunsen burner and then shake it. That is an engineering problem. How do you actually heat the reactants or the reactants inside the reactor? How do you mix it? Because a chemist will take simply the test tube, go to the Bunsen burner and he shakes it. The shaking is nothing but the design of a stirrer. That is what you would have done in your fluid mechanics course. In fluid mechanics course, you should have been taught how do you design a stirrer. Okay, impeller for example, impeller. So now we use that information, engineering information, to design a chemical reactor. So that is the difference between simple chemical reaction and chemical reaction engineering. You are engineering a chemical reaction by considering mass transfer, by considering heat transfer, by considering fluid mechanics, where you have to stir, and also by pumping the liquid inside the reactor, pumping the liquid outside the reactor. All these are engineering problems, and all of them are required for the design of a chemical reactor. That is why we say the name chemical reaction engineering, it is beautifully coined by a person called Vlugter, VLU, I hope, yeah, Vlugter, this is the name. He is the person who told that name chemical reaction engineering, and immediately that idea was taken by Levenspiel and he put the same name as his textbook name, chemical reaction engineering. You are engineering a chemical reaction. Good. So now, understanding that there are large varieties of chemical reactors possible, and now for that you need some common information. That common information is given in this diagram. This diagram also I have modified it, but again, as I told you, I am taking from this book, red book. This is chemical reaction engineering by Levenspiel, and if you see this diagram, I have a blue arrow inside, blue arrow, which is input. That means that is the input to the reactor. Anyway, output comes as a green arrow. And now what is the information we required is this kinetics and contacting. This is the information that is required. And I tell you, if you are able to understand this complete diagram, I guarantee that you know reaction engineering very well. So meaning, you should know exactly what is the meaning of this input. What is the meaning of this kinetics? Not only just meaning, how do you get kinetics? How do you get input? And you also should know this contacting. Contacting means we have type of reactor. What kind of reactors are possible? Right? So, all the reactors what we have seen in the pictures, what I have shown you earlier, can be simply simplified as only three reactors: the batch and then continuous. In continuous again we have two reactors, that is the plug flow and mixed flow. My interest is in this next 6 hours or 5 hours now is only to tell you about these three reactors. But you also need, for example, kinetics. So this information on kinetics, I have also written kinetics. Below that I have written physical and then chemical. What is the meaning of this physical and chemical? I have now explained that we have this reaction, carbon burning, where I have a carbon particle, and then the oxygen has to diffuse to the surface of the carbon particle for the reaction to take place. So that means oxygen has to diffuse. Diffusion is a mass transfer, and that is a chemical step, that is a physical step, it is not a chemical step, right. So diffusion of oxygen to the surface is a physical step where you use mass transfer equation. I am sure most of you would have studied the mass transfer where you use Fick's law of diffusion. Here also we use Fick's law of diffusion, or there is Fick's law, or otherwise there is also another law of mass transfer, the convective mass transfer, because it is flowing and then coming there. It is not simply only diffusing. So that is the reason why we have this mass transfer step which will come under physical step. That is what is the meaning of this the kinetics when I write there chemical step, sorry, physical step. Chemical step is actual chemical reaction, right. Okay, I will show you next. So that means if you see the performance equation in the picture what I have shown you there, output equal to, it is a function of input, kinetics, and then the type of reactor, what reactor you are taking, right. So now input, let me say few words about input. Okay. So now what do you mean by this input? I told you that when you are producing sulfuric acid, that is the flow chart I have shown you first flow chart. Yeah, I think let me go back and then show you. Yeah. So when we are talking about the sulfuric acid plant, I told you someone has to tell that you produce 5,000 tons per day, 5,000 tons per day of sulfuric acid. And I have also given here the steps required for sulfuric acid. This is SO3, and now this SO3 plus H2O giving me H2SO4. Sorry, SO3. Yeah. This is H2SO4. So now what you have to do is, yes, what is the input? What is the input means how much of, if I am talking about this, how much of SO3 I have to send and how much of H2O I have to send. That is what is the input. If I am talking about SO2 plus half O2, how much SO2 I have to send, because this is the reactor, this is the reactor, this is the reactor. And when I am talking about this reactor, how much of sulfur I have to take and how much of oxygen I have to take. That is what is the input that in that picture. Yeah, this blue arrow is nothing but this value. How much of sulfur or how much of sulfur dioxide or how much of sulfur trioxide for that reactor. There are 3 reactors in sulfuric acid plant. I think one is absorption reaction and all that. Okay. Yeah. So that is the reason why we have now this input which is known to you. Input is the simplest one to get. I will give you another example. Let us say that during rainy season many people may get fever. Now I think throughout India we have now this rains going on. So they may get this fever, and now you have to produce more fever drugs, fever medicines. People quickly count that there are so many patients, maybe 1 lakh patients. Each patient has to take 500 milligrams per day of the tablets. So now you can calculate how many milligrams for 1 lakh people, and you go to the stoichiometric equation and then find out from the stoichiometry what is the reactant that is possible. This is what exactly you studied in your process calculations course, process calculations, and some universities may call this process calculation course as material and energy balances, material and energy balances course or process calculations course. In that course itself we tell you how do you calculate the reactant if the product is given. The product here is sulfuric acid, for example, H2SO4. So how much of SO3 is required? And to have this SO3, how much of sulfur dioxide is required? And to have this SO2, how much sulfur is required? These are all the calculations you do in your process calculations. You see how beautifully all the subjects will fit in the entire chemical engineering curriculum. And everything starts with the reactor. So reactor is the first equipment that should be designed in actual industry. But this is the one we teach normally at the end. Maybe in 3rd year we will teach before you close. The reason there is you have to understand fluid mechanics, you have to understand thermodynamics, you have to understand process calculations and heat transfer. All these subjects are required for the design of reactor. That is the reason why we start with process calculations, then thermodynamics, and then fluid mechanics, heat transfer, mass transfer, and then go to chemical reaction engineering. I think now you can get the overall picture of the entire syllabus, even though in industry reactor is the starting equipment. That's all, period. Good? Okay. So now this kinetics part, yeah. Next one, input is easily seen for us because we can calculate knowing that okay, you have to produce maybe 1000 tons per day or maybe 2000 tons per day. Good, over. So now input is already I know in that output equal to in that equation. Input I know. Kinetics now you have to find out. How do I now find out the kinetics part? So now I will give you this example again. I have SO2 to SO3. This is gas, this is gas, this is gas, this is gas. I am taking the simple homogeneous reaction. So that is the reason why I am taking this example. Right. Now I have to find out SO2 and O2, they are reacting, and I should develop an expression, an equation to calculate how much of sulfur trioxide is formed or how much of sulfur dioxide has reacted. So now the rate equation is a function of temperature, concentration. If I call this one as A, this one as B, this one as C, then the rate of reaction is a function of Ca, SO2 and also Cb. So now all my rate equations should have this concentration, the concentrations and temperature. Temperature is the easiest one. All of you would have studied what is called Arrhenius equation. Arrhenius equation. Arrhenius equation where K is written as most of the time, okay, either A into e power minus E by RT. This is the temperature. So that is what it comes here. The rate equation is a function of temperature. This is what is Arrhenius equation, where you should know activation energy, you should know this frequency factor. Right. So now we have this in a rate equation in terms of Arrhenius equation, then we should know what is the functionality of Ca and Cb. Here only, sometimes if you are lucky, you may get, sometimes if you are lucky, you may get minus Ra equal to K Ca Cb. We say this is first order, this is first order, overall second order and all. But I am sorry to say that most of the time you don't get this kind of nice beautiful equation except in the examinations or when you are discussing on the board. Because when you take more complicated rate equation, your mathematics will be so complicated, you forget about what we are teaching and you are worried about only mathematics. So that is the reason why we always try to simplify as a teacher, take the simplest mathematical equation and then give the concept. Right? So once you understand the concept, then it is only mathematical exercise. That's all. That's why you have math 1, math 2, math 3, math 4 and all that. Right? In your BTech curriculum, you have so many mathematics, that is the reason. So mathematics will come automatically later, but before that, to teach that concept, we take the simplest reaction, maybe first order, maybe second order, and this is the one what we call second order. So now, when we talk about the second part in that equation, in that box, output is equal to input, kinetics and contacting. Input I have already explained, that comes from the material balance and which comes from the actual demand, how much you have to produce, and kinetics from stoichiometric equation where you have to develop. And the development of kinetic expression itself is a big thing. I think your teachers will tell you once these lectures are over, once these lectures are completed, then your teacher will start, or some of the teachers would have already started because your college would have started earlier. So now that kinetic part, some of you may be knowing and some of you may not be knowing. So what I request all the teachers is give that connection between this kinetics and then the input and contacting. I will tell that how these two information, this input and kinetic and contacting, all three give the final expression for the design. So my portion is only that contacting part. Once you take the contacting part, how do I design? But before that, what we require is kinetics and input. This is what I just would like to request all the teachers to give that connection, so that the students are not lost. Okay, from IIT one professor talked, but we don't know where to put that information in our overall reactor reaction engineering problems, right? Okay, so now let me see, to give some more information about kinetics. This is the one I told you. We have homogeneous reactions and heterogeneous reactions. And again, let me write here, we have 3 phases: gas phase, liquid phase and solid phase. Meaning of this is, we can have reactants in the gas phase or liquid phase or solid phase. Now, there are combinations. When you have 2 reactants, then I may have gas and liquid, I may have liquid and solid, I may have solid and gas, right? So, I may have solid and solid also, I may have liquid and liquid also. But when I say liquid and liquid, both are not miscible. Like kerosene, if you put oil in water, oil is separate and water is separate, it will float depending on the density. So now that is what also is 2-phase liquid phase reaction, right? And when I have gas and solid, there are many examples like coal combustion, coal, carbon is solid and oxygen is gas, this is gas solid reaction. So all that combinations are given in this heterogeneous part, what I have shown on that board in the PPT. Now you can see we have gas liquid, and there gas liquid can be catalytic reaction or non-catalytic reaction, but mostly non-catalytic reactions. I have gas solid, we have liquid liquid, we have liquid solid, solid solid, gas liquid solid, all this. Normally what I do when I teach my students is that I give an exercise that get for each of the heterogeneous reactions, for each category there are 6 categories, that is gas liquid, gas solid, etc. In each one 5 examples, 5 industrial examples of chemical reactions. Like for example, if you take gas solid, there are many. One gas solid reaction example is you have coal combustion, coal gasification, or iron ore reduction. Iron ore also is a metallurgical reaction, but it is a gas solid non-catalytic reaction. So you also have, this is a very good exercise. I think I request all the faculty members to give this exercise at least 3 or 5 in each category. The student has to go to library, collect that information, so that he or she will feel that yes, there are so many kinds of chemical reactions that are possible. In fact, this is the information we try to give in chemical technology course. In chemical technology, we talk about various chemicals production. There you have these reactions. For example, if you take chemical technology by Dryden book, Dryden chemical technology, he gives like that beautifully so many reactions for every process. So they may be liquid-liquid reactions, there may be gas-solid reactions, there may be gas-solid-liquid reactions and all that. So one of the examples of gas-liquid-solid reaction is your production of vegetable oils, the dalda what you use, vanaspati we call, that is the trade name. Dalda, production of dalda or vanaspati has 3 phases. We have hydrogen gas, that is gas phase, we have liquid in the form of oil, unsaturated oil, and then we also have solid as a catalyst. We normally call that one as Rani nickel catalyst. Rani is the name of the person, nickel catalyst. So nickel catalyst is solid, liquid is oil, and then you have gas, hydrogen, and we happily eat in our food that oil what is produced through this reactor, which is called slurry reactor, where we have 3 phases. So that is why chemical reaction engineering is highly involved, I tell you, very involved. So many combinations are possible, and now I have not talked anything about that homogeneous part. Homogeneous part is only a simple reaction like between gas and gas, and gas mixes very well, because gas, our imagination is in terms of molecules. So when I have reactant A as gas, reactant B as gas, so both of them can be easily mixed and you get homogeneous mixture. That is why it is called homogeneous reaction. Homogeneous reaction is and homogeneous reaction and homogeneous reactor design is the simplest one to start with. But the same principles, the same equations are also used for heterogeneous reaction. So that is why whatever I teach you, it will be useful for the entire chemical reactor design anywhere. Good. And also you see, under homogeneous, I have another one called liquid-liquid reaction, homogeneous phase. So when I have liquid A and liquid B, two reactants, both of them are thoroughly miscible. So when they are thoroughly miscible, reactant A need not travel to react with B like carbon combustion, coal combustion. In coal combustion, oxygen has to go to coal or coal has to come to oxygen. This is what is the mass transfer step. Whereas in homogeneous reaction, I have the gas, if it is a gas, two gases A plus B, both are available in the same mixture. So reactant A need not search for reactant B. So reactant B is immediately it can react with reactant A because A is available by the side of B, B is available by the side of A. Whereas in carbon combustion, carbon is different and oxygen has to flow, and now oxygen has to diffuse into the particle then for the reaction to take place. That is the difference between homogeneous and heterogeneous. The difference is mass transfer and heat transfer. Heat transfer also comes into picture. So you have heterogeneous reactions and homogeneous reactions. What I am going to talk is about homogeneous reactions. Right? Okay. So these are the combinations. I think please note down, I think this PPT will be available with you. So you take that this table and then try to formulate various reactions. Even though it is not my part, but your teacher also will allow that, so that you will understand what is the difference between heterogeneous and what is different between homogeneous. And I also teach this course chemical reactor theory for MTech students here in IIT Madras, and there I will give you an examination. So I will ask them that what is the difference between homogeneous and heterogeneous. Like parrots, parrot repeats what it has been told. So like parrots, they simply repeat saying that homogeneous means single phase, heterogeneous means more than one phase. Beyond that, when I start questioning, I am sorry to say that I don't get many answers except very few students. The main difference between heterogeneous and homogeneous is mass transfer and heat transfer, which are physical steps. That is the main difference. So whenever you go to, for example, interview and all that, if they ask what is homogeneous, what is heterogeneous, instead of saying single phase and two phase, if you are able to tell that, yes, in a heterogeneous system, there are two more steps involved. It is not chemical reaction plus heat transfer, chemical reaction plus mass transfer. Example, again my coal combustion is easy to visualize. That is the reason why I am repeating all the time coal. So when you have coal combustion, at room temperature, you may have oxygen plus coal, but reaction will not take place. All of us know that, right? Otherwise you cannot store carbon at all. Every time it will be burning all the time. You have to use heat transfer for the coal particle and the oxygen gas to go to 600 degrees centigrade. That is what is the heat transfer I am telling. That is a physical step. So, and even in homogeneous reactions, we put the reactant gas A, reactant gas B, and because it is naturally mixes, because it is gas, so then increase the temperature to reaction temperature, maybe 100 degrees, maybe 200 degrees. So that is why heat transfer automatically comes. So heat transfer, mass transfer, these two are coming in heterogeneous systems. Whereas mass transfer in a homogeneous reaction, all these things are available when you heat the reaction mixture to reaction temperature. That is the main difference. Good? Yeah. So, I have also told there some are catalytic reactions, some are non-catalytic reactions. The difference again is in catalytic reaction, I think I will give you one example. Examples are always better. So, if I give you a non-catalytic example, I have Fu2O3 solid plus H2 gas giving me Fe solid plus H2O gas. Why this is non-catalytic reaction? The reason is Fe2O3 after the reaction is not Fe2O3. It is Fe, it is a different compound, right? And this is a solid, this is a gas, and we call this as gas solid non-catalytic reaction because there is no catalyst here. Now let us see. I have H2 gas plus N2 gas plus Fe. This is solid, right? So now this I am writing below. This is NH3 gas, this is ammonia, and catalyst is iron, plus this is Fe solid. So when I balance, this will be 3, this will be 2, right? Yeah. Yeah. So this is the balance, but now you see Fe, it started as Fe because it is a catalyst, and now after the reaction is over, it is still a catalyst, it is Fe. That is the difference. This is called gas solid catalytic reaction, and this is called non-catalytic reaction. I have not expanded. This is called non-catalytic reaction. That is the main difference between catalytic and non-catalytic reactions. But in both, the procedure is same because in this you also have nitrogen and hydrogen going to the surface of the catalyst, not only to the surface, because this Fe iron is porous iron, porous. It has got fine pores. So now hydrogen and nitrogen has to diffuse into the pores. It is a mass transfer step. And the catalyst has to maintain the temperature of, I think it is around 500 degrees centigrade or so, right? Yeah. So now you have heat and mass transfer coming here. Same thing here. Fe2O3 is a solid, H2 is a gas, and now this H2 has to go into the particle to the surface and then into the particle for the reaction to take place to get iron. This is iron ore. This is called hematite, correct? Yeah, hematite. So this goes to finally iron. That's what we use every day, iron, for many things, and that is a non-catalytic gas solid reaction. And you also design a reactor for this. You also design a reactor for this. And you also design simply two gases coming together and then design the reactor. So now when you have homogeneous part in that classification table, then we call them as homogeneous reactors. And the first course in chemical reaction engineering is homogeneous reactor design. Some people call it as chemical reaction engineering 1, right? And chemical reaction engineering 2 is that catalytic and non-catalytic part, that is heterogeneous reactors. So this is the classification. So now I hope you got some idea about this, and now for every category here, for gas liquid reactions, if it is heterogeneous, gas solid reaction, are all categories there, or in terms of homogeneous liquid and gas, you have to develop a rate expression. That rate expression is like this. Simply rate equation as a function of temperature and this concentrations, but this is for homogeneous. This is for homogeneous. For heterogeneous, there are two more steps coming. Can you tell me? For heterogeneous, there are two more steps coming. So for heterogeneous, the two more steps are, this is only concentration and temperature, at high temperature. So there you have to mass transfer step will come into picture. Mass transfer. So mass transfer from the gas to solid, temperature from gas to solid. You should have studied in fluid heat transfer how to calculate the heat flux through film, through gas film. Heat flux. I hope you understand flux. Flux is any quantity per unit time per unit area. How much heat, how much energy transported for unit time, maybe per minute or per second, per meter square. That flux is required, because once I know the flux, I can calculate the temperature. Right? So you have the normal Fourier law of heat transfer and also convective heat transfer and all that. So those equations will automatically come there with the heat transfer coefficients, thermal conductivity and mass transfer coefficients and diffusivity. And all of you also know what is the connection between diffusivity and mass transfer coefficient from film theory. So that is why in reaction engineering, all these subjects are also integrated. They have to be integrated, there is no choice. Right? So that's why I have to tell you all this to give the actual reactor design expression, because some of you would have covered, but I am sorry, still I have not given you how to exactly develop the rate equation. For me to start with, I assume that you have this minus RA. So this minus RA is K into CACB. The definition also I will show you sometime later, right? So normally the rate equation is expressed as moles of A converted per unit time per unit volume. Those who have completed the first introduction in your normal course, those people would have been already knowing what is the definition of rate. It is very nicely given in this book again, first chapter. First chapter. What are the various kinds of rates and how do you define them? What I want to teach is only the homogeneous part, where the definition is, if I have, I will show you later, but I think I will give you also, if I have A plus B going to R, then the rate minus RA is defined as minus 1 by V dNA by dt. This minus is for the reactants because reactant concentration is decreasing, right? So this is written as moles of A reacted per unit time per unit volume. Normally what we write is moles per minute, one example, plus per liter. So moles reacted per minute per liter of the reactor. It can be per meter cubed of the reactor, whatever you like, right? So that is the definition, and this definition simply tells that we have so many moles reacted per unit time per unit volume. Now this is equal to, this entire thing may be equal to a simple first order reaction K into C. That's all, right? How do you get this one is K into Ca? You have to do experiments. You have to go to laboratory. You have to conduct experiments, and there are some procedures, processes, some methods to develop these rate expressions. And that is the first part what normally we teach in chemical reaction engineering, but I am only just giving the connection, but I am not giving the details of how do you actually find out the rate equation. I am sure most of you would have found this rate equation in your high school physical chemistry, maybe in your 11th class or maybe in your 12th class. You should have studied in physical chemistry laboratory to find out order of reaction. They would have given the simple example, a simple reaction to find out what is the rate expression. That rate expression is very important for us in the reactor design. Good. So now let me go back to, this is what I have just written. Definition of homogeneous rate. That I can be A, that I can be even for the product. Normally what we do is, if it is a product R, then product is being formed, so it is positive. That is the convention. And when you are writing the rate expression with respect to reactants, then you have the negative where it is decreasing with time, because otherwise there is no reaction. You take so many moles of A, so after 5 minutes you should have, when you start with 10 moles per liter, then that has to become 5 moles, 1 mole, 0.1 mole, and finally everything converted or about to convert. So that is why that minus sign there, right. So this is a very general definition of homogeneous rate. Moles of I formed means for product. The same thing can be written moles of I reacted for the reactants. Normally what we take there is a key reactant. What is a key reactant? Again you should have studied in your high school also. A key reactant is the one which has in that stoichiometric equation the lowest number of moles. Like for example, in A plus B going to R, I may take 10 moles of A and mole only 0.5 moles. I mean, actually stoichiometry tells me 1 mole of A plus 1 mole of B giving me 1 mole of R. But I may take 10 moles of A and only 0.5 moles of B. So now that is B is the key reactant, because that is the lowest quantity. After 0.5 moles of B is reacted, then reaction cannot take place, even though I have a lot of A. That is the key reactant. Sometimes I may take 1 mole of A, 10 moles of B. So now after 1 mole reacted, then there is no A. So that is why that becomes key reactant. That controls the reaction, right. So the rate expression, that minus Ra, is always for a key reactant, whichever is limiting reactant, whichever is the limiting reactant. Okay. I have also given just below homogeneous rate, where the rate is expressed as moles per meter cubed per second. What I have written there is one term is temperature, the other term is concentration dependent. And now once we have the concentration dependent, the equation can be like this. As an example, minus Ra equal to Kca to the power of A. A is what we call as order of reaction. Now this K also can be expanded in terms of Arrhenius equation. I hope definitely you remember what is Arrhenius equation, right. So that part is Arrhenius equation, that K naught e power minus E by RT is Arrhenius equation, where E represents the activation energy, K naught gives the frequency factor, or sometimes people say it is pre-exponential factor, and then Ca is the concentration dependent term. Good. So now with this combination, what kind of rate expressions are possible I have given here. What kind of rate expressions are really possible, right. So now if I take only A going to R, just A going to R, now you can see all those equations which I have given below are possible. That is why what you have to appreciate here is that if I ask you what is the order of reaction for this reaction A plus B going to R, what is the order of reaction? And high school reaction is your reaction. With high school knowledge is, sir, it is second order reaction. If I ask you A going to R, what is the order of reaction? So your reaction to answer is immediately, sir, that is the first order reaction. No, that is wrong. You can never tell what is the order of reaction by looking at the stoichiometric equation. Number one thing you have to learn in chemical reaction engineering. Like exactly, you cannot say whether a person is good or bad by looking at the face, right. All of us know about that. So that is why even though it is very, very innocent, A going to R, very simple, but that may give you hell. So it is not that easy to find out to tell that this is the first order reaction. Then what do? You don't have any other choice except going to laboratory and trying to find out what is the actual order of reaction. There are methods, I told you. There are some reactors, and then there is some methodology to find out order of reaction. Once you know the order of reaction, if it is first order, then you write, oh, this is first order reaction, minus RA equal to K into Ca. Then you are very happy. And once you know experimentally, you proved that this is first order reaction, then if someone asks you, what is this order? You can say, yes, it is first order, sir. How do you know? I will ask. Or the other person can ask. The moment you, because you have done experiment, sir, I have proved it with experiment, it is first order reaction. So those are called elementary reactions where the stoichiometric coefficient and then the order of reaction, you know, the power corresponds. Those are called elementary reactions, elementary. And elementary reactions. And I am sure your teachers would have taught you if they have already started reaction engineering course. Because reactor design comes a little bit later, maybe after 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later. Right? So elementary reactions, non-elementary reactions. Non-elementary means you can never tell what is the order of reaction by looking at the stoichiometric equation. By looking at the, if this is elementary reaction, this is second order reaction. A plus B going to R. So there are so many possibilities for the reaction, for the reaction, what is that, rate equations, and all those possibilities I have given there. The possibilities are minus area can be zero order reaction. If you see A going to R and then below that, then it can be first order reaction, it can be second order reaction, it can be simply nth order reaction where n can be 0.5, 1.2, right, or 2.2, but never beyond 3, right. So that is why, and also you may have KCA by Ca plus K. So all combinations are possible. So that is why please do not have a fixed idea of A going to R should be only first order reaction. Open your mind, have open mind, and then try to find out what is the order of reaction only from experiments. So as chemical engineers, you can never avoid experiments, even though you want to avoid, if you want to be in chemical engineering, particularly chemical reaction engineering. Okay, good. So that is the one. So now my portion is that information required for the reactor design, the same slide which I am showing, and I have put a round around that. This is what I am going to tell in my lectures in the next maybe 4 hours. But the information what you require there for is what is input, what is kinetics, which I have not. I gave the connection, and also I try to justify what will be the, what kind of reactors you have. But fortunately, all those wonderful pictures what you have seen can be reduced to only 3 types of reactors. Only 3 types. Let me write that. The 3 types of reactors, ideal reactor. Yeah, those 3 types of reactors will be batch reactor, and we have continuous reactors. Right? In continuous reactors, you again have here 2. One is plug flow reactor, the other one is mixed flow reactor. So what I am going to talk about is what is a batch reactor, what is a plug flow reactor, and what is a mixed flow reactor, and how do you design it. This is all for either gas, only gas is available, and whether you have liquid. But the equations what we are going to derive will be universally acceptable for even heterogeneous reactions, absolutely no problem. Same equations, but what is the difference? The difference will be rate equation, right? So that rate equation will be in terms of mass transfer and in terms of heat transfer. Whereas in homogeneous reactions, it will be only simple K into C or any complicated equation also, but you will have concentration term and temperature dependent term. There you have mass transfer coefficients and heat transfer coefficients. You see, that is the extra information, but the reactor design is exactly same what we are going to talk for homogeneous, right. Okay. So now I have brought you to this point where we are about to start what is a batch reactor and all that, right. So if you have any questions on this, please ask, please don't keep the questions with you, right. Anyone can ask the questions now from CIT or Amrita or I think maybe RC or RV, yeah, DCRU, all these, anyone can ask now questions.
Why we use small reactors for high speed reactions?
The design expression once we derive, you will know that. Okay, I think I will just write, even without deriving I will write. So one of the design expressions for let us say this mixed flow reactor is V by Fa naught equal to Xa by minus Ra. This minus Ra is the rate equation, right, and this X is conversion what you want, 90% for example, and then Fa naught is the amount you are sending. I told you input is this, kinetics is this, and this is what you have to get, 90% conversion. To get 90% conversion, the volume you have to calculate. So this is fixed for 90% because you want 90% conversion. So Fa naught, you are how much you are inputting into the reactor, and now minus Ra. If minus Ra is very large value, from mathematically you are dividing this by a large value where this side becomes small and volume becomes small because Fa naught is fixed. So that is why when you have very fast reactions, the rate is very fast, very high. So when you have a large value, then naturally you will have a small reactors. On the other hand, if this is very slow reaction, that means you are converting 0.00001 moles per meter cube per minute, very small quantity. So that is why you need more time or more volume for the for getting the same conversion. That's why volume increases. So it depends on the rate, how quick it is. If you have very fast reaction or very high rates, that's why you get a small volume. And you know, for catalytic reactions, you have the catalytic rate is very fast when compared to normal rate. That's why you are using catalyst, right? So when you use a catalyst, your volumes may decrease a lot, and that comes from the derivation where you have this kind of equation, and whatever rate reactor I take, maybe plug flow, maybe mixed flow, maybe batch reactor, in all these three also the rate comes in the denominator. When denominator is large, this side you have low values, so that's why volume becomes low or time becomes low. Right? Understood, or you have still some doubt?
So understood. Thank you, sir.
Oh, another, yeah. Okay. How do you shape a reactor in influence a particular reaction? Okay. How does the shape of a reactor influence a particular reaction? Yeah. In fact, there is no connection between a particular reaction and then the shape of the reactor. Absolutely, you cannot. If I have second order, you take globe, and if you take first order, you take tube. No, absolutely there is no connection, right? But when I am started explaining to you what is the reactor design, so definitely I will tell you there are only tubular reactors and then tank reactors, but why we take in that shape, all that I will explain to you later. But please remove this doubt in your mind that shape of the reactor and reactor, particular reaction, they don't have any connection. Okay, but whether you have fluidized bed, packed bed, depends on whether you have a catalyst or no catalyst. That I will explain to you later, right? So that is what is the, yeah, I think good. Is there any other question? Oh, GC of first one, yeah. Okay. How to determine the frequency factor of Arrhenius equation? Very good. Yeah, I think you have not done the physical chemistry experiment. I think you have to plot the Arrhenius equation on log semi-log sheet. See, your equation is K equal to K naught e power minus E by RT. This is Arrhenius equation where most of the time in chemical reaction this is valid, no problem at all. So that we can safely take. So now take logarithms of this. Ln K equal to ln K naught minus E by RT. So I will take this one as E by R and this as 1 by T. So this can be plotted as ln K versus 1 by T. This is nothing but this is X, this is M, this one is, I am just writing plus, and then here you have C and this is Y. I hope you recognize this equation now. Y equal to mx plus C. So we are converting this Arrhenius equation into a straight line on semi-log graph. So minus ln K you plot 1 by T. So you will get like this. So the slope M is E by R. Negative slope, minus will come anyway. And this intercept is C, ln K. This is what is ln K, where K naught you can calculate, that is the frequency factor. Right? This is how you have to, after taking the data for various temperatures, what is the K value, and then you will get this. So I think that is a very good question. I think in the laboratory you do that to find out the frequency factor, and then the slope will give you activation energy, and anyway R we know, R is the gas constant. So you can happily determine that. I hope you understand that. Okay, yeah, another question is there? Oh, BSAR, okay. BSAR has another question. When there are two separate phases, there exists a boundary layer. How is that I visualize this layer and how to determine it? Yeah, again very good question. Oh, thank you. You are all listening and then very active. Okay. So now I will give the simplest example. Yeah, like you have the water here. This is liquid phase and we have the gas phase here moving like this. Right? So now this gas touches the surface here. Now when at this point you will have the gas also moving like this, and these molecules which are touching the surface of this water, they are supposed to be stagnant, dynamically moving, but these molecules will be going and then hitting and then coming out like that. And now when you look at that carefully, there will be some layer of molecules which are always forming that one when compared to the gas moving here. This gas is moving much freely, going out in the form of molecules. But this one will sometimes, I mean I have given a wavy surface, but if I take a straight surface like this, the gas molecules are here which are slow moving, and then that forms a gas film something like this. And one has to visualize that only, and the most difficult part here is how do I exactly calculate the thickness or how do I measure the thickness? It is not possible. Right? I don't know in fluid mechanics whether you are taught about boundary layer. Particularly, it is very easy to imagine when I have a solid surface and over this is solid surface, over this a fluid is flowing, either gas or liquid. So the molecules on the surface, this is the slightly complicated example I gave, but the simplest example is this is the solid surface over which we have the liquid or gas flowing. Now the molecules of those liquid and gas on the wall are supposed to be sticky. They are not stagnant. So this is what is you also assumed in solving fluid mechanics problems, what is called no slip condition. No slip condition. Right? That no slip condition automatically gives us an idea that there is a stagnant layer. Again the problem is we have some equations and all that to calculate boundary layer thickness and all that, but it is not that easy to determine the boundary layer. So that is why we will experimentally measure and then only we will try to find out the mass transfer coefficient and heat transfer coefficient through the boundary layer, right. So that is what is the one, and if you are not satisfied with that, you can always talk to me or you can always send me the mail, okay. So I think that is a good question because boundary layer cannot be exactly measured. Only visualization is when you have two phases, the molecules very near, and also here we are supposed to have, if it is liquid, a liquid film around this side and that side. That is why in gas absorption, the mass transfer chapter, gas absorption, we will say that we have the interface, this side liquid phase, liquid film, and this side gas film. Chemical engineering with a lot of imagination and a lot of speculation, right, and people have imagined that, did experiments and found that this model is consistent. So that is why we call two film theory, one film on gas side, another film on the liquid side. And in reaction engineering also we have to find out through this what is the amount of gas that is coming out, and through this what is the amount of same reactant that is coming through, all that we have to calculate from mass transfer coefficients. Very good, good questions. Yeah. So biochemical reaction, a homogeneous or hetero? Good question. Yeah. In biochemical reaction, if you take the microorganisms, and microorganisms are not uniformly distributed in the liquid. So if you take microorganisms and then the substrate separately, then it is heterogeneous reaction. So the reason is the microorganisms have to breathe oxygen. This oxygen has to dissolve first in the substrate, and that has to be transported to the microorganisms, right. So that is why strictly speaking the biochemical reaction is heterogeneous because mass transfer is coming into picture automatically. But sometimes the mass transfer is so fast, then the assumption is it becomes as homogeneous, because the reason is then immediately the liquid the oxygen is dissolved, and then that is taken by the microorganisms, and that is immediately converting the substrate. So that is why that can be taken, but strictly speaking when you take cells as well as liquid, then it is heterogeneous because mass transfer is coming into picture. Death rate effect on what? On the rate. On the rate of reaction, yes, definitely. When more microorganisms are dying, the rate of reaction is low, naturally. Yeah. Yeah, when you determine frequency factor, okay, will that create difference? CCT, okay, yeah. Activation energy is thermodynamic quantity. How is it related to the rate equation? Yeah. So I think this one is a difficult question for me because there is a lot of things to be explained here. Okay. So in chemical reaction engineering, what we develop that equation is that the activation energy refers to the activation of the molecules which are reacting. So that the entire thing is put in terms of this Arrhenius equation, right. So I think if you, okay, I think it can be related definitely, but I am not able to give that kind of very lengthy answer. I will simply say that you have reaction, yeah, I think you have some kind of this is energy and this is reaction path. This is reactants, this is products. So our activation energy E1 and this one is E2, which is also connected to our delta H, heat of reaction. So the activation energy, what is required for the reaction to take place and at this point forming complex or whatever, because again there is activated complex theory, the other one is activated complex, and there is another one, two theories are there. So yeah, collision theory. So these two theories what we have. So that activation required for the reaction to take place to form this activated complex is the one what we are talking in terms of this one, activation energy in Arrhenius equation. right? So, but this can be, as you said correctly, this E1, E2 is also connected with activation energy, right? So, I don't have that kind of information about explain to you thoroughly between delta H and then E1, E2 and all that. So, kindly ask your teachers, or if I can get some information later also, you can send me a mail, I will reply. Okay? Performance equation is used to determine the output as a function of input kinetics contracting pattern. Can the same equation be used for all scale of reactors? Yeah, for any reactor there is no problem at all. So, all that information is required, that is input is required, kinetics is required, what kind of reactor you are talking is required to calculate what is the volume for a given conversion, for a given conversion. Or if volume is known to you, you have to calculate what is the conversion. So, that again I will repeat that in reactor design in one way is very simple. If you look at the equation, so V by Fa naught equal to Xa by minus Ra. There are only 4 variables here. So, one variable already I know is Fa naught, that is the input. How many tons you are producing converted to reactant Fa naught. Then this I know already. Minus Ra I am getting from stoichiometric equation. A plus B going to R, what kind of rate you get, what kind of rate equation you get. So, these two, this I have to find out. This is given by demand of the plant, how much you have to produce, and now you have 2 variables. If you have a old reactor already with you, where it is, let us say 10 meter cubed, you already calculated volume, you have that reactor, then you can calculate conversion. If you are designing a new plant, there is no new reactor for you. So, you have to design that, then you fix this conversion, maybe 90% or 95% conversion. Now, calculate volume. So, out of 4 variables, 2 are known to you. This is in the laboratory experiments and this is the input what you have, and depending on, you already have a old reactor, calculate conversion, or if you are designing totally a new plant, assume conversion, calculate volume. So, that is why, and this is nothing but the performance equation. So, that is why performance equation is just nothing but this design expression. So, that is valid for laboratory reactor, heterogeneous reactor, homogeneous reactor, for everything that is valid, absolutely no problem. Okay, Dr. Manoharan? Beulah madam. Okay, whether the activation energy is constant for a reaction, is it very, yeah. So, this is a problem because activation, normally when the reaction is taking place, we fix the range of temperature, and sometimes for some reactions, depending on elementary, non-elementary, activation energy also may change. But most of the reactions within that narrow range of activation energies, we have constant activation energy, right? But that has to be experimentally determined, and when you are doing over a long range of temperatures, then it is a different matter, you have to carefully do it. But most of the time in reactor design, we fix our temperature range, that is not very much. So, within that range always you have activation energy constant. If activation energy is changing with temperature, then it is hell for us to design, very difficult. So, fortunately it won't change that much within short range of temperature. Yeah, what is that? Sir, you said order of reaction is experimental quantity, can be determined for any type of reaction. Yeah, it has to be determined. For any type of reaction, it has to be determined, there is no other way. It is empirical. That's all. Thank you, we are signing off. Good. Thank you.